All right, hello everybody. My name is Brother Kane, and welcome to my channel. And this is where I give my perspective on a lot of different issues and topics and subjects and things like that. But first off, I want to say that there's always been generally two groups of people in the world: people who know shit and people who don't know shit. And back in the day, the people who don't know shit, they used to respect and look up to the people that know some shit. Cause you be standing around talking, you know some shit, I know some shit. Hey, we talking about some shit we know. And the people who don't know shit, they will stay on the sideline. And you might ask one of them, you'd be like, well, hey man, how come you're not saying anything? And they'll be like, well, hey man, I don't know shit, I'm just gonna keep my mouth shut, cause maybe I can learn some shit. And so, but what's happened over these last 20 or 30 years, some of the people who don't know shit, they just started making up shit, and the rest of the people who don't know shit, they started believing that shit, and that's what's happened to this country. That's this country has become overrun with people who don't know shit, and that we continue to elect people who don't know shit. And so I got a whole video on that one that I'll be doing later, but that's just the state of this country. Now the title of this video is called The Real Boogeyman. So there's been a lot of conversation over the past few years with Trump, labeling the immigrant as the boogeyman. I mean, they cause it all the problems in the country, all the crime, running up the welfare system, I think even and taking all the black jobs, the black jobs. I mean, I think Trump's brain is like stuck in the, in like the 17th century or something. I don't know where that man's brain is at, you know what I mean? But black people, ain't picking nothing, okay? They'll all those jobs that you picking stuff, there ain't any black folks out there that's looking for those type of jobs, okay? And so, but Trump claimed that they're taking all those jobs, and even Vance was saying that they were taking mortgages. Remember in the debate with Waltz, he was saying that the immigrants were overrunning the mortgage system. Now I don't know about that. I mean, how is people that are picking tomatoes, are able to afford a mortgage? I mean, who knew? My goodness. But anyway, they have been framing the immigrant as the boogeyman over these last few years. But is the immigrant the boogeyman? I mean, but think about it. What group causes more heartache, pain, and suffering than any other group in America? That would have to be the deranged white guy. I mean, think about it. No one causes more heartache and pain and misery than the deranged white guy. I mean, it wasn't an immigrant that went into that black church in South Carolina and shot up all those folks at that prayer meeting. It was a deranged white guy. I mean, it wasn't an immigrant that was in that hotel in Las Vegas shooting down on all those folks at that concert. It was a deranged white guy. And it wasn't an immigrant that set off those bombs at the Boston Marathon. It was a couple of deranged white guys. And it's certainly not an immigrant that's shooting up all of our schools and killing up our kindergartners and school kids. I mean, Sandy Hook, Columbine. It was a deranged white guys. And it wasn't an immigrant that made things worse at Sandy Hook by spreading a bunch of lies and nonsense about the whole thing being a hoax. That would have to be the deranged white guy, Alex Jones. And it wasn't an immigrant that shot up the Pulse nightclub and killed all those party goers. I mean, it certainly wasn't a charismatic immigrant who raped and killed dozens of white women. That would be the charismatic, deranged Ted Bundy. And I mean, you could go on and on. I mean, it wasn't an immigrant that shot up. I mean, that killed dozens of young boys in the 70s in Chicago and buried them underneath his house in his driveway. That was John Wayne Gacy, a deranged white guy. And you know, Gacy used to dress up like a clown, and perform at hospitals, children's hospitals, and birthday parties. I mean, think about that. I mean, I think he was the inspiration for Stephen King's book It and the movie. And so, and man, I've always had a fear of clowns myself, you know. I just, even as a kid, I always saw clowns, just was always scary to me, you know. And to this day, I cannot watch like the movie It. I cannot watch that movie at night. You know what I mean? I gotta watch that thing in the daytime. You know, you watch it. That clown, man, is just creepy, man. Just you just cannot take it. And what else freaks me out? The mirrors, you know. Anytime you have one of those scenes where you have a mirror and then you looking at it, and then the reflection changes into like a sinister look on the person's face, or they moving and you're standing still, man, that just brings the hair up on the back of your neck right there, man. I'm telling you. You know, I don't know if you ever remember those. There was a show a while back called The Scare Tactics, and they used to set up these, fake scenes, and they'd have these entertainers, sometimes athletes and other famous people. They would come in and they would scare them, with some kind of made up scene, and they called it Scare Tactics. And I tell you, if they ever found a way, to create a mirror, that could use AI, could manipulate your image while you're looking in it, and your image start changing, man. If I saw something like that, man, I think I would just die on the spot, That would just take me out, man. So that's a trick. If they ever figure out how to do that, they better not do that one. That's one you better not do, because you're gonna hurt somebody with that one. But anyway, John Wayne Gacy was definitely the boogeyman. I mean, without a doubt, and it wasn't an immigrant that sent out those hippies back in the 60s to kill up Sharon Tate and the LaBiancas. It was Charles Manson. I mean, and can you get more deranged than Manson? I mean, just to look at that guy is like, yeah, he's deranged. He just, all you got to do is just glance at him, you know what I mean? And it was an immigrant, of course, that killed and chopped up and cannibalized over a dozen young men in the Milwaukee area back in the 80s. That would have been Jeffrey Dahmer, and it's so ironic, Trump and Vance, they were talking about and lying about immigrants eating pets, but deranged white guys been eating people. And the immigrant is the boogeyman? Oh, I think not. Jeffrey Dahmer was the boogeyman, okay? I mean, and it wasn't an immigrant that convinced over 1,000 of his church members to follow him, to give up all their money, all their possessions, and then follow him over to Guyana, where they end up eventually committed mass suicide. That would have been Jim Jones, a deranged white guy. And of course, the most deranged white guy of all times, the one that just takes the cake, and that would be that little short guy over there in Germany back during World War II with the funny mustache and the bad haircut, Adolf Hitler. I mean, Hitler was there anybody more deranged than Hitler? I mean, really, and Hitler was white. I mean, Hitler was whiter than white, because he believed, that the Aryan race, was superior to all other races and everything, And that was before Jesse Owens, and the rest of them brothers, they showed up and showed out at the Olympics. They embarrassed Hitler, so bad that he didn't even want to hang around, to shake anybody's hand, I mean, Jesse Owens, he taught Hitler the original critical race theory, He kicked your Aryan ass in that critical race and forced you to change your theory. And so I like to think that Jesse, he rocked Hitler's world so bad he shattered his belief in the Aryan dominance and all that stuff that it led to Hitler's downfall. He started making bad decisions. He got even more strung out on drugs than he already was, and he eventually lost the war, But now it's too bad that with all of this DEI nonsense and erasing Black history, that our grandkids may never know how Jesse Owens went over there to Germany, embarrassed Hitler, and he may have helped to win the war. How about that? But anyway, so the immigrant, is not the boogeyman. It's obvious that the boogeyman is the deranged white guy. I mean, think about it. The FBI profile for a serial killer is a deranged white guy. I mean, can you imagine what life would be like in this country if the FBI profile for a serial killer was a deranged Black guy? I mean, you talk about racial profiling. I mean, Black men would be under 24-hour surveillance. I mean, and think when you're walking around the mall or the grocery store and just out and about, you're not being vigilant, looking out for an immigrant, to jump out from behind the produce section with an AK-47. You're looking out for a deranged white guy to jump out from behind the produce section with an AK-47. But now, when you think about all this, you say, now, what's the point? What is the point of trying to make the immigrant the boogeyman? And what are they getting at with all that? Well, you can look back to this French philosopher by the name of Voltaire back in the 1700s. If you had to take any philosophy courses in college or anything, you probably heard of Voltaire. And he was one of the first guys back then to speak out against the monarchy, and he was pushing hard these new ideas about freedom of speech, freedom of the press, separation of church and state. Sound familiar? Yeah. The founding fathers of this country, Jefferson, Hancock, Adams, all them, they all knew. They either knew Voltaire or they knew of him, and they read all of his stuff, and they basically based their whole governmental mindset and ideas off the stuff that Voltaire was writing. But you never hear about Voltaire. You never hear anybody mention all the contributions that he made because he influenced those guys, And one way you can account for that is the fact that, there's this German writer by the name of Franz Kafka, back in the 1930s and 40s. He quoted one time, he said that everyone is necessarily the hero of their own imagination. I mean, think about it. Everyone is necessarily the hero of their own imagination, meaning that whenever you have a situation and you're telling a story about something that happened and trying to recount what happened, and if there was any indiscretions in there, you always lift yourself up a little bit higher than anybody else. You know what I mean? So you're always going to make yourself look a little bit better. And that's kind of like what happened with the founding fathers. They sort of took all the credit for Voltaire's writings, his ideas about running a government that was different than the monarchy system. And so the history books make it seem like that Jefferson and Hancock and Adams and all them guys, that they just dreamed all this stuff up themselves. But they didn't. They got all that stuff from Voltaire. But anyway, that's how history goes, his story. that's what it actually all comes down to. But anyway, Voltaire, he had a quote one time that he said that still stands true to this day. And he said, if you can convince a man of absurdities, then you can get him to commit atrocities. If you can convince a man of absurdities, then you can get him to commit atrocities. And that has been so true throughout history. I mean, go back to Manson. He had told those hippies that he was going to start a race war, that those killings was going to start a race war. The blacks were going to win, and then the blacks wouldn't be able to run the government. They would have to come to him to get him to run the government. And so that was the absurdity that he fed to those folks. And they went out and committed that atrocity. And same thing with Jim Jones. He convinced all of his followers of the absurdity that the government was this deep state and they was coming to get them. They was going to lock everybody up and kill them all or whatever. And so he convinced them of that absurdity, and they eventually followed him over to Guyana, committed mass suicide, and got involved in that atrocity. And then, of course, Hitler, he, convinced all of his henchmen of the absurdity that the Jews was all the problems. We just get rid of the Jews and everything's going to be great. And so they went out and committed all those atrocities after listening and being convinced of those absurdities. And then you can even look at January 6th. I mean, Trump and other Republicans, they convinced all those folks of the absurdity that the election was stolen, and they went out and they committed that atrocity on January 6th. So the words of Voltaire are still running strong. And when you have a country full of people who don't know shit, then it ain't hard to do. It ain't hard to do at all. But at the end of the day, the boogeyman, does not look like an immigrant. The boogeyman looks like one of those fine people down there in Charlottesville. Anyway, that's it for now. I'm working on my response to all of the DEI nonsense. I'm going to set the record straight on all of that. So, if you know some shit, click the like button and subscribe, and if you don't know shit, then don't. But anyway, take care and stay safe.